All right, Grant Liffmann is with me, former Atlanta Hawks executive, NBC Sports front office insider. And Grant, let's talk about expansion. As expected, the NBA Board of Governors voted to approve the exploration of expanding to Seattle and Las Vegas. This stops short of saying the league will expand, but while Adam Silver did say that it was possible that the league wouldn't, it sure seems like a foregone conclusion that we are getting two new teams in a few years' time. So let's start here. Is expanding a good idea for the NBA?
It's kind of funny that when you talk to, people who are involved in the actual decision-making process of it, it really comes down to money, right? That's usually what it comes down to. But there are a few groups that are worried about the competition level that comes with this and what's going to happen with that. And I know there's some fear about the amount of tanking that's already happening, and we'll get to that at a later time. But I do think that expanding to specific cities that matter, like a Seattle, is a good idea because that actually just brings a whole new fan base or an old fan base, but a bunch of new fans as well back into the league. And I do think there is, I mean, it's shown that Vegas can hold a fan base as well and put together something good stuff. I think Golden Knights, especially, have shown that. But I don't. I think just expanding for the sake of expanding isn't really something that is a really great idea because you're just doing it. This actually has some bones that make sense because there's some understanding of the economics and how this will play out. But I do understand the concern though about talent level and making sure that this doesn't water down the league too much. Um, there's some teams right now that are just so bad that it kind of makes you believe that you're like, I don't know if this is good. But you have to remember if they can change the tanking stuff just a little bit, these teams, these rosters aren't as maybe as bad as you think. They're just resting or sitting or injury riddled with really good players as well. So it's a long-winded way of saying I like the concept of Seattle. Vegas as well, I'm intrigued by. So that's the reason expanding intrigues me rather than just the idea of doing it.
So there's an obvious economic argument for expanding, though it's not as maybe significant as some of these owners might think. And I want to get to that in a second. But I have yet to hear a good basketball explanation for why expanding is good for the NBA. And at this press conference on Wednesday, Howard Beck over at the Ringer, he asked this question: is there a basketball argument to be made? And there was some lip service paid to competitiveness, more competition, all that stuff. But by definition, you are diluting the talent in the league. You are taking a league that is filled with players for 30 teams, making it 32. And if the expansion draft looks anything like previous expansion drafts look like, you're going to be weakening some of those teams in the process. Maybe not significantly. They're not going to be able to pluck all stars off the team, but we're in a league where rotation players matter. And the guy that's at the eighth, ninth, or 10th guy on the bench can make a difference on a championship team, especially in a league with as much parity as there is. I don't see the basketball argument that can be made for expanding. I think it's going to make the league significantly weaker for 3 or 4 years because in addition to the X number of teams that are bad this year, and I take your point that some of these teams aren't really bad, like are the Wizards as bad as they would be if all their guys were playing? Are the Jazz as bad as they are if all their guys were playing? I think it's talent-wise, it's not as bad as it looks right now, but there are still teams out there that are unequivocally bad. The Sacramento Kings are unquestionably bad, among others. And now you're adding two more teams that, if they're smart and if they have the smartly run front office, they're going to try to be bad for a few years. They're not going to try to compete for a play-in spot 2 years into their existence. So I think from a basketball perspective, it's going to make the league worse. Now, the economic perspective, this is where I think some stuff gets overlooked. Like, yes, the short-term boon of X billion divided by 30 is significant, right? If it's 7 billion, if it's 8 billion, if it's 10 billion, one of those pie in the sky numbers, then yeah, that money flows right into those owners' pockets. But the when you're worsening, when you're diluting the talent pool, you're worsening the league and you're making the regular season less relevant. And I know we're only in year one of this broadcast rights agreement, but it's never too early to start looking into the future about what that next broadcast rights agreement could look like. And if the league continues to go down a path where their regular season takes on less and less meaning, to me, that has a financial impact as well. That's going to hurt your bottom line the next time Adam Silver or whoever takes over the NBA, Mark Tatum, somebody else, Sam Presti, somebody else takes over the league. Whoever takes over is going to be faced with that conundrum. Is that a reasonable position to take?
Yeah, I think it's always reasonable to look at that. And that's why there's a number, right? That is that break even point that owners are going to be looking at. And that's what their exploration is part of, is seeing what's the number that these teams need to sell for a break even based on the current TV deal. But also, let's jump into the future. What if that deal falls off a little bit? What does that look like as well? And that's part of it. The economics have to be a big part of this. For some owners, that lump sum right out the gate is everything they need because they're not looking 20 years down the line. For other owners, that lump sum in the very beginning means less to them, right? And that's what's interesting, by the way. Not enough is talked about the difference in money some owners have versus others, right? There's the Ballmer group, and then there's others, right? So that does play a factor. One thing to also, to going back to what you're saying into the dilution of talent. One thing I've talked to about, and this is about since I was with Atlanta and just team executives I've spoken to this year, now that they have 3 two-ways available, what you're seeing is an actual problem in that people have realized there aren't as many players that they want to add to the roster as the 3 two-ways present, right? And what they've seen is you see the same names kind of cycling around between teams. Like, oh, this guy plays well in the G League. He pops up on this franchise. He's on a two-way or a 10-day. Then he gets over here, and it's the same guy, and he's recycled through. And the days of going to the showcase, the G League showcase, and discovering somebody and being like, I got a guy, I'm going to get him, those days have kind of flown out the window. So we're at a point now where there is a dilution of talent right now in the league. I think what, some people are hopeful about is that, we've seen such great stories of these undrafted guys and really the dynamics of college basketball have changed with NIL, right? When guys leave, when they don't, and maybe they'll stay in college later and maybe be a more refined product by the time they get to the NBA. So there are maybe ways to kind of navigate this, but it's scary to think about adding 2 more full rosters to this group and then now dividing up who's already in the G League. No offense to a lot of players. There's a lot of good players, but I'm just saying this is from team executives, the way they look at it. They're like, there's no one in there that they're like, I missed out on this man, right? They have the opportunity to get these guys with 3 two-ways. So it is a little concerning, the dilution of talent. Absolutely.
So let me ask you about what I think is the elephant in the room, and I think was undoubtedly on the mind of some of the governors in that room. And that is, why is relocation not coming up more? Because relocation seems to solve everybody's problem. It gets 2 new teams or existing teams in Seattle, in Las Vegas. It keeps the dilution of talent at the level that it's at. No, you don't get that big fat expansion fee flowing into your pocket, but you protect your TV deal and you eliminate 2 markets that aren't really working. And look, I don't mean to jump into the lion's den of the super fans in Memphis and New Orleans, but the reality is in those 2 markets, it hasn't been working. The attendance figures speak for themselves. And in both those markets, you have arena situations that are coming up for expiration, the lease agreements. So it's kind of setting up that you could conceivably start to look in that direction. No, it's not this simple. You've got to deal with owners that are currently there and they've got to want to go. And there's certainly a fight with the city. And certainly the NBA doesn't like pissing off fans anywhere. I mean, they've been burned by that in the past. But why does that not come up enough? Because that would seem to be the most practical way to address the Vegas-Seattle situation.
I think you actually answered your own question right there. It's just the NBA is not going to force it. right? And until an owner says like, I want to move this team and that's my interest and that's where I think this can go. Um, the NBA is just not going to force them to do it. Therein lies the problem because everything you're saying is absolutely right. And I'm not going to say which teams it has to be because I do understand your Memphis and New Orleans argument. And there are a few other teams that maybe would fit the bill as well.
I'm just picking them because I combined them with the attendance numbers and with
Right.
the arena situations, both of which are in flux at the moment.
And that's the reason, and those are the cities that do come up, right? And those are the cities that have consistently been talked about in that regard. And really, in general, it just comes down to if an owner wants to move the team, then the NBA probably would be excited about it. But they're not going to force them, right? And so until that happens, it's just not even worth, really diving too much into because like there aren't any solutions besides the NBA forcing them. The only other solutions could be is if there was some monetary reason why, like, I don't know, maybe the league gets together and says, maybe it benefits the league if you move here because you can, here's more money and somehow. But it's costly. It's a lot of work. You piss off a lot of people in the making of it. And, think about this. The NBA right now, as they talk about expansion, are talking about righting a wrong for Seattle, right? They're saying we need to right a wrong of moving out the team from Seattle. So like, it's probably not in the business right now of being like, hey, what we should do is also rip out a team from another fan group right now.
Yeah, it's that certainly isn't something that's top of mind and amongst the NBA people, but it would solve a lot of their problems either way. Vegas and Seattle coming to a NBA arena near you.
Hit subscribe for more news, highlights, and analysis from the NBA on NBC.